All right, welcome to The Explainer. Now, we all think we know what reading is, right? It's something simple, something we figured out when we were kids. But what if there's a hidden, incredibly powerful process going on every single time we open a book? Today, we are diving into a theory that completely reimagines reading, not as a straight line, but as a serpent that consumes and remakes itself, and in the process, remakes you. We usually picture reading as this one-way street. Information just flows from the page, through our eyes, and neatly parks itself in our brain. Simple enough. But what if that whole model is just wrong? What if reading is less like a highway and more like that ancient symbol of a serpent eating its own tail? A closed loop. See, most of us were taught what educators call the banking concept of reading. You just deposit knowledge into your brain account. But a really fascinating framework called the Ouroboros theory says something way more dynamic is going on. It argues that reading is a recursive loop, an Ouroboros, where your mind is actively consuming a text in order to literally rebuild itself. So let's follow this serpent on its journey, shall we? First, we're going to completely rethink the act of reading. Then, we'll see how the reader and the text actually become one. After that, we'll explore the two very different rhythms of this process, understand how it literally rewires our brains, and we'll end with this amazing final moment the theory calls the radiant chomp. Okay, first up, let's start by challenging our most basic assumption here, the idea that a reader and a book are ever really two separate things to begin with. The absolute core of this theory is something called the unified manifold. It's this idea that the second you start reading, you, the book, and even the room you're in all fuse together into this single, self-contained system. For that moment, there is no outside world. There's only the world being created by the act of reading itself. Right. So if the reader and the text actually merge, how does that system even work? I mean, how can a person and an inanimate object truly become one single thing? Let's try to map it out. So the theory pulls this idea from cybernetics, which is basically the science of how systems control themselves. Think of a thermostat, right? It has a feedback loop to keep the room at the right temperature. But reading is a special kind of loop. You, the reader, you aren't just an outside observer watching it happen. You are an active, essential part of that loop, constantly changing it just by participating. And here's how the different parts of that loop actually function. Your eyes, they act as the sensor, just gazing at the text. Your brain's existing knowledge, that's the comparator, and it's constantly checking what you're seeing against what you expect to see. Your focused attention is the effector. That's the bite that actually consumes the words. And that feeling of, aha, I get it, that is the feedback signal, the taste, that tells the entire system whether it's on the right track. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This loop doesn't always spin at the same speed. It actually has two very distinct rhythms, and it all depends on what you're trying to get out of your reading. So, on one hand, you've got surface reading. Think of this as skimming. It's a low-energy, stable cycle. Its whole goal is to just quickly pull out the main points. But on the other hand, you have deep reading, and this is a high-energy, transformative spiral. Its goal isn't just about getting information, it's about generating genuine insight, and that pushes your mind into totally new territory. And we absolutely need both. As the cognitive neuroscientist Marianne Wolf puts it, to really thrive in our world today, we need a biliterate brain. We need the efficiency of that surface-level skim, for sure, but we also desperately need the empathy and the critical thinking that only comes from that deep reading spiral. So if deep reading is so powerful, so transformative, how does it actually work? I mean, what's the fuel that powers this engine of change? Well, the engine is powered by something that's actually deceptively simple: gaps. Gaps are all the details, the descriptions, and the motivations that an author intentionally leaves out of the text. They are the empty spaces in the story. For example, just read this simple sentence on the screen. So what did you just see in your mind's eye? Was it a heavy oak door, a flimsy screen door? Was the room bright and sunny or filled with shadows? Whatever you pictured, your mind automatically filled in those gaps. You weren't just passively getting information, you were actively co-creating the world of the text. That right there, that's the end. And this active participation is exactly what pushes you up what's called the cognitive spiral. You start by simply decoding letters into words, sure, but by filling in those gaps, you move up to comprehending, then interpreting, then critiquing, and ultimately you arrive at a state of genuine personal transformation. And this brings us to the final stage of the whole process, the culmination of that deep reading spiral. This is where the serpent finally closes the loop, in a moment that the theory wonderfully calls the radiant chomp. This incredible moment is also known as the fusion of horizons. It's that magical state where the boundary between you and the book completely dissolves. You're no longer just interpreting an author's ideas from the outside, you are literally thinking the book's thoughts as if they were your very own. And the outcome of this fusion is, well, it's profound. It's not just about adding another fact to your mental library. It's about fundamentally changing who you are. At this point, you don't just know more, you are more. This is the very definition of transformative learning. And this quote just captures the ultimate purpose of the whole thing perfectly. Reading isn't about escaping the world. According to this theory, it's about consuming it, digesting its patterns, and allowing those patterns to reconstruct you from the inside out. So the next time you pick up a book, remember the Ouroboros. You're not just looking at words on a page. You're stepping into a transformative loop. And the question is no longer just what will you learn from this, but rather, what will you become?